Welcome to Real Historian. Today, we're taking you back to an era where justice was not just brutal, but bizarre. When being guilty wasn't always necessary to be punished. When your punishment could involve fire, water, or even farm animals. Welcome to medieval Europe, a world where justice and cruelty often walked hand in hand. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will leave you shocked, amused, and maybe even a little horrified. This is Bizarre Punishments from Medieval Europe. Let's begin by setting the stage. In medieval Europe, crime wasn't just breaking the law, it was breaking God's law. And punishment. That was meant to purify the soul and scare everyone else. There were no police, no fingerprints, just superstition, pain, and public humiliation. Punishment wasn't about reform. It was about revenge, shame, and control. Take the trial by ordeal, for example. Imagine being accused of a crime. Now imagine proving your innocence by walking over hot coals, or holding a red-hot iron bar, or being thrown into a freezing river, bound and helpless. If your burns healed quickly, you were innocent. If not, you were clearly guilty. If you sank in the river, you were innocent. But you might drown before anyone pulled you out. In medieval Europe, drowning could prove your purity. Then there were punishments designed not to kill, but to humiliate. The Scold's bridle was a metal cage locked around a woman's head, usually for gossiping or nagging. It had a spiked plate that crushed her tongue to stop her from speaking. There were also shame masks, twisted, grotesque metal faces shaped like pigs or demons. Each one represented a moral crime: gluttony, lying, vanity. The criminal would be marched through the streets for all to mock. Justice by embarrassment was both cruel and unforgettable. Some punishments went even further. In the Holy Roman Empire, traitors could be executed by dogs. Tied down and torn apart in public. In France, a pig was once put on trial for murder. It had bitten a child who died. The pig was dressed in human clothes, found guilty, and hanged. Animals were tried in court because people believed animals had moral responsibility. Torture was also used frequently, not just as punishment, but to force confessions. The rack was a long wooden frame. Your wrists were tied at one end and your ankles at the other. Slowly, you'd be pulled apart. Joints would pop, muscles tear, bones crack. Thumbscrews were small but painful. Your fingers were crushed between metal plates, tightened slowly. Most people confessed under torture, whether they were guilty or not. Some punishments were not about confession but about making a public example. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, was one of the cruelest inventions in human history. The criminal was tied to a large wheel. One by one, their limbs were shattered with an iron bar. Sometimes, the executioner would strike the chest early, offering mercy. Sometimes, they wouldn't. The mangled body was left on display for all to see. Then came the punishment for treason: hanged, drawn, and quartered. First, the traitor was dragged to the execution site. Then they were hanged, but only partially. Next, their body was cut open and their entrails pulled out while they were still alive. Sometimes the entrails were burned in front of them. Finally, the body was quartered, cut into 4 parts. The head was placed on a spike, and the body parts were displayed across the country. It wasn't just death. It was a statement of total power. Now, what about the Iron Maiden? It's shown in films as a coffin lined with spikes. The victim is placed inside, the door shut, and the spikes pierce the body. But here's the truth: the Iron Maiden likely wasn't real. Historians believe it was invented in the 18th century, long after the medieval period. There's no solid evidence it was ever used during the Middle Ages. Still, it became one of the most iconic images of medieval torture. Not every punishment involved death or torture. Some were simply strange. People caught gossiping might be locked in the pillory, their head and hands trapped between wooden boards while people threw garbage at them. Bakers who cheated customers could have their ears nailed to their shop doors. Those who urinated in public could be dunked in human waste or forced to carry a bucket of dung on their heads. Men who beat their wives might be made to ride a donkey backward through town, dressed in women's clothing. Justice was often cruel, sometimes comical, but always public. Religion played a major role in medieval justice. Heresy, opposing the church, was considered one of the worst crimes. It was punished by excommunication, torture, or burning at the stake. Flagellation, public whipping, was used to punish sinners. Sometimes, offenders had to whip themselves in front of a crowd. Exile was another form of punishment. Being banished from your town and your church meant total isolation. To the medieval mind, exile was often worse than death. Some laws and punishments seemed designed to embarrass. In parts of Germany, if you falsely accused someone, you might be forced to wear women's clothing. In the city of Lübeck, drunkards had to wear a giant beer mug helmet and parade through town. These punishments were about mockery. They turned the guilty into walking warnings. Behind all of this was a harsh truth. Medieval punishments were not about fairness. They were about control. Kings ruled by divine right. The church spoke for God. Punishment served to maintain their power. The message was clear: step out of line, and you become the next example. Today, we have courtrooms, appeals, and human rights. But not long ago, a simple accusation could mean the end of your life, or your dignity. So the next time you complain about a fine or a traffic ticket, remember, at least no one is forcing you into a shame mask or nailing your ear to a door. Thanks for watching Real Historian. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark side of medieval justice, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories from history's strangest chapters. Which punishment shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments, we want to know what you think. Until next time, stay curious, and stay far away from a medieval courtroom.